Well, I think we need to take Greg Martin's story has been given to the corrupt military, and it has been given for motives that were not clear. And so I think it points out that if there is a act of social justice or creation of schools or helping something, that's going to create a lot more goodwill for America than the typical aid to Pakistan that has been wasted over the last 5 decades.
How will it take U.S. to actually hear these, intellectual conversations that, the U.S. foreign policy towards developing countries needs to change, and then they should be investing more on a social basis than on a military, but it's been going on for Pakistan at least for 5-6 years. What will it take U.S. our politics to know and actually act upon it? Because there are clearly think tanks which are talking about that. There are already people who are the discussions have been going on, but it seems like it doesn't get to the White House, or people in politics actually are still sticking to the old style politics, which is feeding into the military and not on the social sector. Is it just ignorance on our part, or is it gonna?
No, it's not ignorant. The reality before either side is a very stark one. I mean, if you're working in the American foreign policy establishment, you have a choice between a corrupt liberal elite that and a possible uncertain, perhaps more Islamist government that might come in its place. So there's really, I mean, it doesn't, that's been the trend of American foreign policy for a very long time with a lot of countries. That is precisely, for example, what we did in Egypt for a very, very long time. We supported the Mubarak regime because we knew that they were not Islamist, and we also sort of turned our back or looked away when that government, the Mubarak regime, gave handouts to Islamists to keep them, sort of under their thumb. And so the problem with that situation, you see it replicated in Pakistan, is that what do you really do in a situation like that? I mean, do you say, okay, we're not going to support, I mean, because the fact is that a lot of the current establishment, it doesn't matter whether the Pakistani political establishment is led by one party or the other. All of the current parties, as we talked about, are replications that I haven't seen anybody else, my entire lifetime, except the same players being recycled, regardless of which side they're on. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the People's Party or the Nawaz Sharif or whoever. And so that's the quandary, and everybody's sort of waiting and watching, and I mean, it's a stark choice. Do you pick a corrupt liberal elite, or do you say these Islamists that are gaining power, we're just going to let that happen? So that's the American position. The problem, I think, in Pakistan, and you always hope that it would go, for example, in a direction like Egypt, where there was a lot of American meddling, but a new young generation said, you know what, yes, we've had a lot of meddling, we have a history of colonialism, imperialism, all of that, but we're going to take back our country and we're going to do it this way. And it's going to take them time, undoubtedly, and it's not a perfect revolution, but they decided to say that we're going to get over this, constant anti-Americanism that just is, in some ways a process of navel-gazing where you just say, well, America's so bad. And then there's like nothing else after that. Well, America's so bad, and then what then, right? So you hope they will go in the Egyptian direction, but you don't know if that will happen, because unlike in Egypt, the U.S. has a tangible presence in Pakistan. So when you've got this elephant in the room, it's impossible for anyone to see anything else or look at internal problems. And then the other side is that because politics has become so hard for young people to get into, mostly because it's very dangerous. I mean, it's very, very dangerous in Pakistan to be in politics unless you have a family that's powerful enough to provide you a lot of security and revenge if you're killed. So what has happened then is that there's been all this social and cultural transformation because people have rejected the political sphere as an area where they can have a voice. So you see a very, very visible, religious revivalism, socially, culturally, and that's what's transforming things. So for me, the problematic part is also that the political sphere, which is supposed to represent change and supposed to sort of absorb all these ideas, is really not something that anybody really looks to anymore, other than entertainment in a sense, because they've now got 20 channels which are at any time of the day or night are broadcasting these very sensationalized sort of brawls between politicians, and everybody just talks at each other and then goes to sleep, and that's that. So it's in those terms, I mean, it's a complex situation where you can't just say, well, and it goes actually to this Greg Mortensen question. I'll give you an example of this king-making that was very sad, is that, I was working at that time in DC, and I remember, where they were distributing that book to congressmen to read as part of like a sort of, I guess, foreign policy thing, but that's terrible because that book is good, but it's not a foreign policy treatise. And if you're sitting on the foreign policy committee having to make decisions about whatever related to Pakistan, I mean, yeah, that's a good morale booster. But what they did is plug it in the completely wrong direction. There is no easy recipe where you can say, let's just build these schools and call it a day, and tomorrow, Pakistan's going to come out a well-functioning democracy where people have a voice in the political system. And that's always frustrating. So, I mean, there are many sort of little pegs to this, right?
What can we do to affect American foreign policy?
Right. Like, just for the fact, like, I think when you go to these debates and everybody is talking about that, yes, this needs to be done and our foreign policies are not correct, but then it doesn't look like the message is being transferred to actually the policymakers.
So I don't know how this is, I'm going to draw another analogy. I don't know how this plays in a place like Indianapolis, but the Obama administration showed remarkably little concern for the creation of jobs for Americans who have lost their jobs and having a lot of trouble paying their mortgages until people went out on the streets. And I have never been somebody who was eager to go out on the streets. I'm not a chanter, and I never wanted to be a political writer either. I just wanted to write books and then sit back and let everybody tell me how great my books were, But I've become more and more political, and I think this is a time to be political in America. And I point that out on the domestic front, particularly because I think it is directly relevant to foreign policy as well. I don't think that the population of this country is going to have any influence on the establishment of this country, either in on the domestic side or on the foreign policy side, unless we engage in politics beyond just voting. And I think that means going out on the street and making sure that our voices are heard.
And I have a story about that, is that I think there is an exhibit now at the National Air and Space Museum on Predator drones. And the way this exhibit is presented is this: these Predator drones are great advances in American technology that allow people to bad terrorists to be killed, and of course by remote control by some people sitting in Nevada, and how fantastic this is. And the Veterans for Peace movement and some of the people from the whole Occupy, the whole amorphous Occupy movement actually stormed the National Air and Space Museum, 200 of them, 2 weeks ago, because they said that this is duping the American public into believing that this war, this secret CIA war, that has not gone through congressional approval, did not go through the bicameralism requirement that is in our Constitution, is being sold to the American people as this, no-cost killing recipe where you can go anywhere and kill this bad guy and there are no consequences to it. We don't have a soldier that's put in danger, and this is so precise and targeted. And so, that's a problem, and I take that as a hopeful sign in a human rights sense, because this is a question that Americans have to determine as a question of American democracy. Is the question of whether we're just gonna, give out these let these wars to the CIA, where we don't know any of the details, where even the lawmakers that we elect, regardless of whether they're Democrats or Republicans, know the details, and they're, so we just don't have to deal with it. But the fact is, as the quote Ethan read to you, is that they do have a cost. They have a cost in the sense that, even if you, hypothetically, and this is not the case, but even if you just killed the one, quote, terrorist, but you destroyed, say, 6 houses. I mean, those 5 houses that were not his house are houses of people who might have lived there for generations. And they're not going to like you for the fact that they now have to go wash cars in Karachi or work at a chicken farm because their house is destroyed and they don't really know what to do about it. So, I mean, it's a cusp for Americans and it's a cusp for Pakistanis. It's a cusp for Americans because we are now at a point where war and revolution and all of this is very, very visible because of, our globalization of media and Twitter and Facebook and all of this. And we're just now developing the ethics of that kind of knowledge. The fact is nobody, for me, I mean, I'm a total creation of that. I write for Dawn, which is published across the world in another place. But any of you can, in one click, even on your phone, read that article. That just never used to happen before. And we are just now, as a world community, developing the ethics of what it is to know so much, and how we're going to respond to it, and how human individual responsibility, ethical, moral responsibility, is changing in response to that knowledge. So, I mean, it's a period of a lot of change, and I think, in that sense, also hope. Yeah.
It's not even approved, and even it's not approved by the U.S. Congress. So what
there
are the stopping points for that?
Well, there is an organization. Well, first of all, and now I'm speaking as like on a human rights level, amnesty position. But what you can do, if you want to know more or do more on the drone issue, this is what you can do. There's an excellent organization out of the UK called Reprieve. That is doing and has done a lot of work. They're a human rights organization, so they're not, they're not political, but they have been very active in trying their best. Because the problem with the drone issue, the biggest problem that even Amnesty faced when we were developing our report on the internal displacement of literally, hundreds of thousands, millions of refugees because of those drone attacks, is that we don't have data. But Reprieve has actually gone and got a lot of data from people in those areas, and they had an exhibit of pictures that were taken by villagers after drone strikes that was in London. I'm not sure if it's going to travel to the US, but if you just Google Reprieve, R-E-P-R-I-E-V-E, and drones, and you'll see a lot of work that's being done on that you can do on that you can inform yourself. And it is, like I said, a purely human rights platform. So it is not taking, someone, and it's based in the UK. So.
Yeah, so the reason I asked that question because it's not approved by the U.S. So if even someone filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government, is it because they said, well, we never approved it, so we're not responsible?
Precisely. I mean, there's also a paper that's actually written by an a Notre Dame professor. Her last name is Connolly, and I really recommend it to you. You can get it on the internet, which deals with the legal issues of drone attacks, both the justifications of hot pursuit that are given to justify those attacks, and the question goes far, far beyond Pakistan, because the current legal rationale for drone attacks of going into a country that does not, that the U.S. has not declared war against, is basically a rationale that would allow any country to go and do such an